Hello, everyone. Hope everybody is doing well. Good evening to all on one. Uh, I would like to welcome all of you to the first live webinar of Shooting from the Nib, a webinar series organized and produced by the Fountain Pen Association of India. Over the course of the last few weeks, we have been thinking of something to do during this time that we have because of the unfortunate lockdown. And we thought, why not start off with talking to some of the people that have made their mark in the fountain pen industry, this hobby of the world of fountain pens and inks. And the first person that we thought of doing this with was Sanay Shah, a very passionate young gentleman who had co-founded Syahi Pens, which were really wonderful and beautiful pens. And I invite him today to talk to us about his hobby and his business and what made him enter the fountain pen industry and what he's passionate about. Welcome, Sanay.
Hello, hello. Good
And
evening,
with
everyone.
uh, and with all of us, we also have Sudhir Kalyanikar, who is also known as the pen person, and we also have
Hey,
with us Pradeep Dupula.
Hello.
So again, welcome all of you. And Sanay, how are you doing today evening?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Mihir. Hello, Sudhir. Hello, Pradeep. Hope you guys are
hey,
Hi.
also doing
Sanay.
Good evening, Sanay.
Yeah, good
good
evening,
evening.
Sanay.
I hope
Yes,
all
and
of
I
you have
look
been
forward
keeping
to
fit in the lockdown.
we've been
Keeping
trying.
Yeah.
safe, yes.
Right.
Keeping safe, yes. Keeping fit, I don't know. We'll know after the lockdown is over.
All right. All right. So, has anybody been doing something different with their pens during this time?
I have actually started writing with them. Maybe that's different as far as I'm concerned.
No, I think that applies to most of us. We've just gotten around to inking up more pens than we usually would.
Yes,
Right.
that's quite
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
So,
I actually had been meaning to copy some notes from an old notebook to a new notebook, and I did that. That took up quite some time and not
It's
as
one.
much ink as I would have hoped,
It's
but at
it's it's
least I.
it's one of those things we do to keep using the pens, even if we don't need to do that
Yeah.
particular thing.
Correct, correct.
Exactly,
Quite true.
exactly.
as for using the ink, I still think it's going to be a task to finish an entire ink bottle of one color, but
I think that's a
we can
given.
also still try.
Of course, and a very famous French brand of ink has come out with some really interesting ink bottles. They're really tempting, but again, the
I
question
know.
of when you would finish all those inks
Yeah.
and where do you store them?
Correct. Correct.
So, anyway, coming back to today's session. So, Sanay, why don't we start off with the first question? And I would just like to ask you about how did you get into fountain pens?
Hmm. So, I mean, if I think about it, I don't think I can pinpoint it to one particular thing, but I've always been into stationery. I think when I was a kid, I think everyone in our family has always appreciated good stationery. So it can be, like pens, not necessarily fountain pens, but like just pens, files, folders, notebooks, and stuff like that. And I think sometime when I was probably like 14 or 15, I saw my grandfather use a fountain pen and I was just fascinated by it. And then I started reading up more about it. I thought it was really cool. Fountain Pen Network was my friend. I've probably gone through virtually everything guys like Hari and Webb had written. At that time, I was really fascinated by the Indian fountain pen industry. So I used to read a lot of stuff written by these guys. And I think, as all of you all know, it's a rabbit hole. And once you get into it, it's extremely difficult to get out of. So
All right, great. Now, how many years have you been down this rabbit hole?
So I'm 23 now. I started when I was 15, so it's been 8 years now.
All right. So, since 8 years, you are 31 now. Is that it?
I'm 23. I started when I was 15.
Oh, sorry. I got it wrong. So, you're 23 now. So, you
Yeah,
started very young, though.
I started very young. That's true. That's true.
Wow. And then you started your brand a few years ago. Isn't that correct? Syahi.
Yes, that's right. So when I was in my second year of college, uh, which is 4 years ago, I started my brand, Syahi.
Wow, wonderful. So what was the inspiration? What made you get into actually manufacturing? Because so 4 years ago you were 19 at that time, just still in college, maybe second year.
Yes.
So what made a second year bachelor student suddenly go into manufacturing fountain pens of all the things? I believe your
So
family is not even in the or remotely connected to the fountain pen business.
no, no, not at all, not at all. No one in my family is connected to the business. So I think, like I said, once I got into this hobby, there was something about Indian fountain pens that fascinated me, and that just made me get into it. And I remember, I mean, I'm sure all of you have gone through the same thing. I started off collecting Ratnams and Guiders and Airmails and Deccans and all these Indian brands. And at that time, I don't think the entire like Yovo and Bok and all this was still that popular. I think Anna was probably with ASA, probably one of the only guys who was doing it. So I was always unhappy with the writing experience of the pen. Also, this went. You all also know how difficult it is to get these pens. Till date, I mean, a lot of pens are still. A lot of these Indian brands are still very difficult to get. You can probably only go to the store and get them. So the idea was to create a young brand that focused on things. So there was always craftsmanship in India, right? So all these guys are still making pens by hand and selling them at prices that are unheard of to people outside India. But I think the focus on branding, some focus on finishing, on nib, and the entire experience was lacking. And at that time, again, guys like Arunji and that were with Lotus pens were still not in it. So I thought there was a real gap in the market in that space, and wooden pens was something that wasn't being done by anybody. So along with a friend of mine, Ayush, we started Syahi, and we focused on wooden pens. And the whole idea was to give a better experience to the customer, to focus on the nib. So we imported nibs from Bok, got gold nibs, got these flash slit gold nibs that were really cool, and just like different stuff. And that was kind of the idea, just to give people a new and a different experience, and show. I thought it was a better way to showcase the craftsmanship that our Indian artisans have.
Well, that's, I'm sure, quite a fascinating story. So, what were your, I mean, I'm sure everybody would like to know what were your kind of struggles that you had to go through to come out with a very unique brand to wooden pens. In one of the discussions that we had, you had told me that you had to be very selective about the kind of wood that you could use for the pen. So, could you talk something about that?
Right. So, wood as a material to begin with is inherently quite difficult to work with. Problem stems from consistency in batches of woods, because based on how old the wood is, there's a different amount of moisture in it. So, machining gets difficult. Another problem with wood is it can't be threaded. So, we would have to insert brass threads. So, now what happens is you have brass threads and you have a wooden barrel, for example. Now, your expansion rates or contraction rates due to changes in temperature and moisture are different for these two materials. So you always have instances of the barrel and the brass threads separating. So we tried our best to get as stable, as dense, as hard uh, woods as we could, and went forth. But it was still extremely difficult, which is why we've decided, and we have, I think, for about a year and a half now, we've stopped making pens with wood, because the longevity and the consistency is difficult. So yeah, and as for starting a brand at that age, I of course I faced a lot of difficulties in terms of, I think it was mainly, so we priced ourselves much higher than a lot of what Indian pen manufacturers were charging at the time. I mean, if you look at the market now, our prices aren't that high, but back then it was high. So it was, convincing people that, an Indian pen is worth this much, the amount of effort that we had put into all aspects of the pen. So of course the pen design, the materials used, the way it was made, the finishing, the nib, the clip, everything was given a lot of thought to. But also the packaging experience. We gave a leather pen case with every pen. Each pen was tested individually. We gave a writing sample with the pen. We gave a warranty certificate. So stuff like this, we just tried to change things up a bit. So it was tough, and I think it was tougher in India. It was tougher to convince Indians that an Indian pen uh, can be on par with a pen from a foreign manufacturer. So I mean, when in 2018 we had launched our pens at the DC and San Francisco pen shows, and the response we got there was fantastic. A lot of people appreciated the effort and the thought that had gone into making the pens, and for people there, the price point was low. So it was well accepted there. So yeah, so I would say more so in India we had difficulty. Abroad not as much, but then again, like I said, because of wood, when you ship it to say America or Europe or any other country, because of the difference in temperature and humidity, there were always some instances of like the wood cracking or the barrel and thread separating. So it was tough in that sense.
I'm sure that must have been a very fascinating journey. I'm sure there were quite a few times where it must have been frustrating for you and nerve-wracking as well. But
Yeah,
as I had been an entrepreneur once, and even though there are times when it's really nerve-wracking and frustrating, still when it's done, you get a sense of satisfaction that is unparalleled, isn't it?
absolutely, I agree with you 100%.
Now, a journey of over 4 years. What, and you have also gone to a couple of shows as well, I believe. What do you think has changed, if anything, over the last 4 years?
So over the last 4 or 5 years, definitely, I think there has been an increase in the awareness about fountain pens. A lot of people who were not into the hobby but have used it as a kid have gotten back into it. But also, what I'm seeing is younger people, people from my generation. Although these are few and far apart, but still a few people from my generation get into it, and that always gives me a lot of joy. When I see young people get into the hobby. Another thing that's changed is I think a lot of, because of the internet, a lot of brands have the capability to now reach a customer directly. So you have a lot of new custom pen makers. It can be in India. So guys, I think Lotus has done a fantastic job of late. But even Vishal with Constellations 88, Hiren Kanakra with Magna Carta, Ranga pens, Anna with ASA pens. They've all increased their reach, and you see a lot of small pen makers across the world sprouting up. And the same trend has been happening in inks. So of course, the highlight from our country will be Krishna Inks, the mark they've made with that. But also a lot of guys in the Philippines, Vinta Inks, Troublemaker Inks. Then you have guys in Poland like KWZ. You have Private Reserve and Organic Studios in the US. So a lot of these niche boutique brands specializing and focusing on just one thing have come up, and because of the internet, I think they can reach the customer directly. Their visibility is more. Another pen brand that comes to mind is Kasama from Philippines. They don't go via the traditional distributor and retailer channel, and you may not ever see them in a brick and mortar store, for example, which is I mean, it's quite surprising, right? A pen, an object that you want to see and feel in your hand, is being sold via the internet only. But that's how the market has changed. And I think it's embraced tech. And I think Brian Goulet has done a fantastic job with not only creating an incredible website, but also the content he puts out, the information he puts out, and forums like FPN. Uh, are great information sources. So I think a lot of people are A, more well informed, and B, have access to a lot more pens and inks now because of the internet. And I've seen that transition happen over the past 4 or 5 years.
Great. I'm sure because even I joined the hobby roughly about 4.5 years ago. And even I have seen so many brands come up and Indian brands develop into really known names around the world. And especially Siahi Pens was definitely one of the stars over the last 4 years. And like you said, Krishna Inks, that has also made its mark all over the world, in fact. My first
Right.
experience of a pen show was the San Francisco Pen Show in 2016. What a fantastic experience. I'm sure you must have had a great experience in the DC show as well, right?
Right.
So let me now call upon Pradeep because he has some questions about the Indian community and what you
Yeah.
see about that, what you think about that. Before we go ahead, I'm going to request all our audience who is watching the session right now to please type in your questions and comments in the live chat box, and we would definitely take up the questions at the end of the session. If you want to comment right now, just go ahead and don't wait for the end of the session to come up. Thank you. Pradeep, I invite you to
Yeah.
take this ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Sanay. Firstly, I must say it's been an inspiring thing to hear you speak about your journey. I mean, you started at 15. That's quite a lot, and
Thank you. Thank you.
8
Thank you
years
so much,
been a
Pradeep.
manufacturer for 4 of them. I mean, that's fantastic and very insightful talk about from a manufacturer's perspective. But I think maybe we should flip the perspective now. And what do you think about the community of fountain pen users in India? And how do you say that contrasts to users abroad? Is it similar? Is it dissimilar? Not, I
Uh,
mean, trying to look at it from a user perspective.
so in one sense, I think even if you take the example of all of us, right? We've all met. Most of us have met over the past 4-5 years. So I think WhatsApp has been a great equalizer. So I think it started from FPN. People started getting into WhatsApp, and then we had the WhatsApp pen group, which could not accommodate all the people because they had a cap on the number of people that could join the group, and then we switched to Telegram. So we have a lot of people in the community. So I think in that sense it's good, right? Because you're in such a niche hobby, and you can connect with a lot of like-minded people. So I think that's fantastic. As for the community in India, I think to a certain extent there are regions, and people stick to people in their particular regions, but that's primarily because of how easily you can meet, right? So you take the Mumbai pen community, for example. We can meet so often. We can meet every 2 weeks because we're all in the same city, but it's much tougher to meet someone in, like, say, Delhi or in Kolkata or Chennai or anywhere else in India. But I think because of the WhatsApp and Telegram groups, and because everyone is in touch digitally, everyone still has an idea of what's going on. As far as the community abroad is, I've not actually had. I mean, the only part of the community I've seen is on FPN, which may not be a very accurate reflection of what reality is. But I've been to the Big Apple Pen Club, which Joshua Lax, a Nibmeister, runs in New York. And to be honest, I thought it was very similar to the kind of meets we have here. So you just go to a restaurant, casual setting. Everyone just gets their pens, gets their inks, gets their notebooks, and there's like a very fun atmosphere. Guys like Joshua are experts at nibs, but anyone who comes at the meet, he'll just tune a nib for anyone. Like kind of like what Sudhir does, for example, and has been doing for so many years. So I think the feeling is the same irrespective of the country the community is in, because the bind is the same. It's pens and inks.
So there's an after party everywhere, you mean?
There's an there's definitely an after party
There's
everywhere.
always an after dark party happening somewhere or other. It's great because, I mean, like you said, I mean, the importance of WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups in this community is way beyond measure. I mean, without a community to help you grow in the hobby, I think many of us wouldn't still be in the hobby and there's an incredible amount of support. I mean, when I was a newbie myself, I remember getting confused about which part of the section a nib would go into and which part a converter would go into. So that's where I started, and people have been helping me out a lot, and it's been fantastic. In fact, that was
Absolutely.
one of our ideas behind the Fountain Pen Association of India, which gets us to the next question, which is, what do you think organizations like FPI do for the members, and what role do we play in furthering the cause of the hobby and the accessories related? I mean, it's not just pens, right? There is inks, there is paper. It's the holy trifecta of these three things,
Right.
and so
So
many
I
other
think
things. Yeah, like small accessories. They all play a role in the hobby. So, what role do you think, or what part do we have to play as an association?
So I think like let's just look back to the first time we had a meet, the FPAI meet that happened. I think it was just a great platform so all you guys, you all put your collections together, and that's, I mean, I understand everyone, like these pens, to people who are not really into the hobby and are watching, a lot of these pens are very, very expensive. So for someone to put their entire collection on display, that's a risk. And all the FPI founding members, they all put all their pens on display. So I think that's fantastic, right? Where else are you going to get the opportunity to look at such pens in person, up close? And also I think it's a great equalizer. I think it's a great platform for, I think when people know there is a community, and when you've given it a name, it's an actual association, I think people are comforted, right? Because sometimes, like, imagine you're in the hobby and you look around and you find that, let's say like 10 years ago, before FPN or before any of this, you're into the hobby, and it's not as much fun when you don't have other people in it to connect with you, to
Absolutely.
share your joy with when you get a new pen, your questions, like issues like fake moblongs, for example, stuff,
Yeah,
stuff like that, or ridiculous prices from some sellers, not only Indian sellers,
correct,
across the
correct.
world. But I think organizations like these
Yeah.
are great information sources because they are unbiased. They don't have any vested interest, but it's just furthering the cause of pens, inks, papers, and also people get access to the best deals, right? Because someone can find a really cheap source for, say, some pen or some paper or some ink, and they organize a group buy, for example. So it helps in that way as well. People have access to much more things, so a variety of things, and at much better prices.
So one of our basic ideas was also to help people overcome the gap and a lot of myth around fountain pens and the fact that they are very messy and high maintenance. Now that you speak of Fountainhead, we had a fantastic time explaining people who were new to the hobby, people who were just curious about fountain pens, not really interested. And we were amazed at the kind of responses. The people were willing to hear us talk for an hour. I mean, I remember talking for an hour to people. I mean, normally I would expect somebody to get bored, but then people were listening, and it's been fascinating meeting the people in the community. And
Yeah, I think Fountainhead, all the talks were fantastic. Yeah, your talk,
yeah.
Sudhir gave a basic talk on nip tuning. Now that, I mean, because if you just see Richard Binder or Mortish on the internet, someone will think nip tuning is like this crazy, like there are only a handful of people in the world who can do it.
Right.
But someone like Sudhir coming out and just making it so easy, simple. You don't need something fancy to do it. Sia Mac talking about basic restoration, Manoj from Phosphor speaking about basic pen making, Pitkar sir just speaking about inks. I think it was fantastic, yeah, Fountainhead. And you're right, I kind of missed that aspect about, people, there are so many preconceived notions people have, right? I think fountain pen, as over time, fountain pens have evolved. When you all were younger, you all probably only had eyedropper pens in school, which is why a lot of people face these leakage issues. But with like CC pens and piston fillers and all these sophisticated filling systems, you have good finned feeders. I think the instances of leakage and that have gone down, and I think that's something that may drive someone who is not into it, and it'll drive him away, right? Because he doesn't want anything to be messy. He may enjoy the pen, but the process of
Right.
filling ink may not be as exciting. So I think FPI and organizations like yours are great for stuff like this to get new people into the hobby.
Yeah, that has been one of the basic principles for us, that the commercial aspects aside, but we need to ensure that we are a platform to get more people on board. So it was interesting to
Right.
hear from you as a participant and as a young seller how you felt about the exhibition and how you feel about FPI. Now, speaking about your role as a seller, can you give us some examples of something crazy which happened with you, like a few difficult customers to handle or some extreme cases? Of course, please withhold the names, but then any
So
experiences that you would like to share with us on a light note?
yeah. So to begin with, I kind of went the wrong way around. I mean, I started off with my own brand and then got into retailing other brands. Whereas if I
Right.
look back, the traditional path would have been you retail other brands, you figure the market out,
Correct.
um, and then you go about starting your own brand. As for extreme customers,
I think you set the bar very high for yourself with Syahil pens, because the pens were good, the service was excellent, and mainly the nibs were fantastic. I mean, for somebody with like me who's got a peculiar writing angle, I think I got brilliant nibs from you. So
right.
yeah,
So even as a retailer, that's kind of been my idea. That a lot of sellers in India may not do, for example, basic nib tuning, but I think that's something that's very important. So tuning every pen that goes through me. But yeah, let's get to examples. In terms of best, I think I've been fairly fortunate. Best, I mean, there are a few customers of mine who will trust me blindly in that they ask me for a pen. If I give them a price, there's no haggling, there's nothing of that sort, and they'll buy it. In terms of worst, I think it's just on price. Yeah, it's kind of commoditized. Pens are commoditized, and it's just that, sir, discount, sir, कितने में मिलेगा, sir, ये होगा, sir, वो होगा, ये होगा. So, but ठीक है, I think that's part of it. No hard feelings, nothing at all. It's fun. It's part and parcel of it. No real strange experiences. Touch wood. I mean, I know as a buyer, I've had a few strange experiences where I've gotten pens that weren't as described. But I think anyone who was buying pens around the time of eBay and like 5-6 years ago has had such experiences where the seller has basically deceived you. Pictures are not an accurate representation of the actual pen, or filling systems don't work too well. So yeah, that's it.
right. Well, that was interesting. And next up, we have Sudhir, the nib master extraordinaire for Mumbai, and he will be taking it from here.
So Sanay, it was very interesting to hear what you were telling us about how you started out with your own brand and then went into retailing others. And I mean, if I were to tell you, that was one of the first things that struck me when I first heard about you. And I'm not going to name this person, but the first I heard about Shahi pens was when this person came up to me and said, "Look, this pen has a problem. Can you fix it for me?" That's what happens in most brands with me. And I had a look at the pen and I said, "Look, this pen is actually designed pretty well." And then this person actually sold you and your brand. I had not met you, okay, before then. And he also showed me how the pen was packaged, which is brilliant, if you ask me. And we had a short discussion, and then he comes up and says that, by the way, do you know this is made by somebody who's just 21 years old? And that completely floored me. I had my first fountain pen when in 1982, I think, right? And I started collecting from the early 90s, stuff like that. I speak to most people, they say we weren't even born at that point of time. That's a different issue. Makes me feel old, but let's leave it there. The point that I have to tell you is that you do have certain customers, and I know a couple of them who are completely, totally, who swear by you. Okay, so that was an interesting part for me when I first heard about it, and also interesting to see you say that you have customers who will do that. And I think I know at least one or two of your customers like that. I want to flip this around a little bit and
Thank
ask
you.
you, want to flip this around. How do you deal with customers? Do you go with the principle that the customer is always right? Or do you, like, if you're facing a difficult customer, handling a conflict, do you roll up your sleeves and say, "Chal tu side mein aa, tere ko dekhta hu," or something of that sort?
So I mean, this is a tricky one, but by and large, I would say I'm fairly patient, as far as possible. But of course, I have my limits. I think I am very clear on, and anyone who's bought from me in the past will know this, that I'm not into the deep discounting or the price game. That's not the way I look at it. I believe that if I'm selling something to a customer, because we share the same passion, it's a bond and a relationship that's going to last a long time. So I mean, you know this, if you've gotten a pen from me, that I will put an effort into each and every pen, to the best of my abilities. Which I mean, just as a side, that a lot of my abilities are courtesy of Sudhir and Siamak, both who have taught me the basics of nib tuning, and who I still go to every time I have a difficulty. But aside from that, yeah, so I put in effort when it comes to the pen. And I try my best, but there are always instances when there is a conflict. But I think it's just case specific. I try my best to be patient. I understand this is an expensive hobby. People are spending a lot of money on it, and I take this into account. And to the best of my abilities, whatever I can do to support. But if they are out, like if there is a false claim, like if I've checked a pen and sent it to them and they tell me it's broken, then that's something I don't accept. I say, okay, let it be, and this is not going to work out.
Okay, that's good to hear. Yes, your customer service, like Pradeep also pointed out, has been exemplary. I mean, I've yet to meet anybody who's come and told me that, look, I bought this pen, and yes, there could be an issue, but it was fixed. Or I bought this pen and it was tuned very well. So yes, that's been what we have heard also. And keep it up. That's all I can say. So
Thanks.
let's look at one other side of the story. We have been seeing how fountain pen enthusiasts have been on the rise. Okay, what I have noticed, and I'm sure a lot of other people may also have noticed, is the number of sellers is also on the rise. If you ask me, I got onto fountain pen network, I think around 2004 or 2005, and to my mind, there were like 3 or 4 sellers in India. And today, if you go to any pen show, if you go anywhere, it's like full. And
Right.
there are people lining up to sell pens. What do you think about this? Do you think competition is good? Do you think it's kind of, maybe we are just overreaching a little bit? What are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, the way I look at it is, you are definitely correct in the fact that the number of sellers has increased a lot recently. Competition is always good. It keeps prices real, and it keeps people on their toes, right? So, as a seller, you know that if there are other people who are selling it, you are not going to overcharge a customer. So, I think the instances of people being overcharged has reduced a lot. As for I think a lot of the not a lot, but there's probably a few sellers out there who have just seen the recent boom in the number of people that are who are in getting into the hobby and have gotten into it, just like any other commodity, and made it a trading kind of business wherein you just buy and sell, or you import and sell. And I don't think that's the right approach for a product like a fountain pen. I think understanding, a, firstly you understand the product, and b, the brand you deal with, right? So if there's a brand you don't believe in, or if there's a brand whose ethics don't match with yours, or whose, it can even be the aesthetics of a brand that you don't like. So I think as a seller, that's your responsibility also, about guiding people, right? Because it's so there is also too many sellers, and there are also a lot of brands coming up. So I think as a seller, that increases your responsibility, because you're supposed to guide your customers. Like, say they have a budget of X, what is the best pen in X? And there is no, I mean, you and I both know this, and everyone knows this, there is no one answer. There is no best pen for any price. There is no best pen, or the number one pen. It's a very personal thing. But just weighing the pros and cons and telling them this is good about this pen, or this is good about that pen, I think that's the responsibility of the seller. And I think a seller has to understand the product first, understand the brands, understand the competition before getting into it, rather than just getting into it like another commodity trading business. And sorry, there is also the question about undercutting and other unsavory practices. There is, I mean, I'll be honest, the our taxation structure in India makes it a little difficult. There is an import duty and there is a GS, goods and service tax, of 18%, since fountain pens are considered luxury items, which increases the price of pens. Now, a lot of people will just go on the internet and type a pen, and they'll see a price on Goulet, or they'll see a price on one of these Dutch sellers, and it's not the same, right? Like you have to take into account that there is freight cost to India probably higher than any other country, and with the duty and taxation, it's very difficult to get the same pricing. So because of this, there is a lot of stuff that comes into the gray market in India, and I think Montblanc is probably, unfortunately, the brand that's seen most in the gray market. But that's entirely to avoid the taxation part. So
Okay, that's very, very interesting to know. And thanks for answering the part of the question which I did not ask. I was initially apprehensive. I wasn't sure whether it's a question which I should actually ask you or no. But you did, I think, answer it in a way that did not compromise your ethics as a seller. So thanks for that. Okay. So looking forward, Sanay, what is next on your plate? What is next on your plate? What are you involved in? What can we expect from Sanay? Maybe 2020 is not the right time to be around, but maybe there is a little bit of thinking that you can. I mean, there have been memes, right, which talk about, can we just reboot 2020? And it's been unfortunate, but we are where we are. But looking forward, I'm sure you have exciting plans. One of the things that we have seen about you is you you do look beyond what a lot of other people look. So there is that visionary part of you which we have seen in action two or three times at least. So where are you headed? What can we expect from you?
so I mean, currently I have been a retailer for virtually either importer or retailer. I am a retailer and importer for several big name foreign brands. Over the past year and a half, or maybe 2 years, another endeavor of mine has been to tie up with Airmail, which is a company very close to me, just because it was probably the first Indian company I visited, and they welcomed me and showed me their factory, which is still in Villeparle East. They still make pens entirely by hand, and just the entire process and their openness to it was so fascinating. Now, a lot of you all know that Airmail, traditionally, a lot of people liked the pens, but the nibs were an issue, only one nib size, and it was scratchy. So my idea was to use the Airmail body, and since Yahi nibs had gotten uh, were well recognized, I kind of took some of their popular models and introduced them with Syahi nibs. Going forward, definitely it has been it's something I have inside me, that I want to have a brand of my own. Uh, it, my focus will be on materials. I like materials like ebonite and wood. I think there are a lot of people who are doing acrylic pens and they have their space, but that's not something that personally appeals to me. Also, on the nib and feeder front, I've been working very closely with guys who are fantastic. Like, let's take Flexible Nib Factory in the USA, Joey Grazie. I think he's a master. So, kind of getting a nib designed and getting the perfect, the feeder is also very important. So it can be a flexible nib where the feeder is key. So, getting a flex nib, ebonite feed, probably some developments in the filling system, different shapes, just innovating and pushing the boundaries for Indian pens. We still get a bad rep. I mean, let's not take any credit away from all the other Indian companies who are doing well now. It can be right from Click, ASA, Lotus, Ranga, Constellations 88, Magna Carta, Gamma, Deccan. They're all doing a great job, but still people may have issues either in the nib, that the nib is not performing well, or in the finishing, or uniqueness in terms of design and material. So the whole idea will be to push the boundary and to kind of change, which has always been my idea, and which was my idea with CIE, to change the perception of Indian pens. So yes, going forward, you all can expect that, and I don't have a time frame from it for it, but yeah, let's see.
So thank you so much, Sanay, for giving us so much of your time. We had a few questions, but I mean, Pitkar sir had asked what your next, what your future plans are, and you have already answered that. And there are quite a few other questions also that you have answered during the course of this really interesting and fascinating talk. So once again, I just wanted to thank you for coming on to this channel of the Fountain Pen Association of India, and we are
The
really
pleasure is
happy.
all mine, and thank you guys. Yeah, this is a fantastic
We,
initiative,
yes,
and
and we are really happy that you agreed when we asked you to, and it couldn't have been a better choice to go with you for our first session. And I believe
thank
Pradeep and Sudhir also have something to say.
thank you so
It's
much.
been fantastic hearing you speak, Sanay, and a lot of insight in your personal journey. I mean, though I've met you so many times, but there's a lot of detail in how you started as and what trends you observe now. So it was very nice hearing you speak, because see, we as users don't often get to see the picture on the other side. So
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
that was very interesting. So thank you for giving us your time.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you guys so much. Again, this is wonderful, and I don't know when we'll be able to have a meet. The Pelican hubs have been cancelled this year, so I
Right.
think this initiative is
Yeah.
is fantastic. Great way to connect with people and for people to get. And that was kind of my idea when I was talking. To just give users as much of an insight as I can about what goes on the other side. So
That's
So
great.
Sanay, Mihir and Pradeep have kind of told everything, and thank you. I just wanted to put one part out there, which is one of the things that you're doing, which I don't see from a lot of other people, is what you mentioned, the work that you do with nibs and feeds, and especially the airmail with the Shahi nibs, stuff like that. And I was very happy to see that you still have that in your future plans. I am very excited to see what you have next and get my hands on them and try them out. So keep them coming, guys. And thanks a lot for sharing your journey and being with us tonight.
pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
All right.
and thank you so much to all the audience for watching us and joining us on this live session. Fountain Pen Association of India was, started to bring fountain pen lovers and collectors together to give them a platform where they could exchange their views, thoughts, and opinions, uh, ask each other help if they needed something. And this is just one of the initiatives that we have been able to undertake during this lockdown period. There are a few more sessions coming up for different people in the pen industry that we know about and love and enjoy their products. So I hope you will join us for those sessions as well. So once again, thank you all for joining, and have a great evening and stay safe, stay healthy. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay safe, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.